know that uneasy feeling you get when you see those headlines about data breaches? Yeah, we're diving into that today. And it's personal this time because a bunch of you sent in articles all about 23andMe and that whole DNA data situation.
Rightfully so. It's a big deal.
Yeah, and it's interesting how it all unfolded. Like back in October of 2023, there were some rumblings, but it seemed kind of minor at first. Something like 0.1% of users affected, practically nothing.
Yeah, almost easy to dismiss, except that's where things take a turn.
Exactly, because that tiny breach, that was just the tip of the iceberg.
It was a classic case of what we call credential stuffing. Basically, hackers get their hands on logins from different websites, could be anywhere, and they just start trying them out on other platforms. So even if just a handful of people reuse the same password for like their online shopping and their DNA ancestry test.
That's all it takes. Those few accounts become the keys to the kingdom. And in 23andMe's case, that kingdom was a lot bigger than anyone initially thought.
Yeah, by December that same year, the real story came out. Turns out it wasn't a tiny fraction of users affected. It was a whopping 6.9 million.
And it wasn't just their basic ancestry info either.
Oh, no. What else did they manage to get their hands on?
This is where it gets really concerning. They got access to the DNA relatives data. That means how closely you're related to your matches, where those relatives live, even things like self-reported family names.
Wow, so it's not just data points anymore. It's literally someone's family tree just like up for grabs.
Exactly. And that's a whole other level of sensitive information.
Definitely makes you think twice about who you can trust these days. And of course, 2024 rolls around and the lawsuits start piling up. 23andMe ends up agreeing to a $30 million settlement.
Which, sounds like a lot of money.
Mm.
Until you consider the sheer number of people affected and the potential long-term impact.
And it gets even weirder, because then every single independent board member at 23andMe resigns.
Almost unheard of, right? Makes you wonder what was going on behind closed doors.
Yeah, major red flags there.
Yeah.
And unsurprisingly, their stock price absolutely tanks. Went from a $10 IPO to barely scraping by above $1.
The whole thing sent shockwaves through the entire DNA testing industry. I mean, if 23andMe, with their resources, could be hit like this, who's to say it can't happen again?
Okay, so we've established 6.9 million people's data is out there. Bad, obviously. But what I don't get is, why is this data so valuable in the first place? It's not like someone's using my genetic code to, like, buy groceries online. Or is that a thing now?
Well, you wouldn't believe.
Now you've got me intrigued. Spill the tea.
It's not about buying groceries, no. It's a lot more complicated and, frankly, a lot more unsettling than that. This information, this genetic blueprint, it's becoming incredibly valuable on the black market.
Black market. Okay, now it feels like we've stepped into a spy thriller. Who's buying DNA data and what on earth are they doing with it? Black markets, spy thrillers, this is getting juicy. But seriously, who are these buyers? And what makes them want this data so badly?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And honestly, a lot of it is still shrouded in mystery. But what we do know is this. Your DNA profile, it's like the ultimate ID card. It's more unique than your fingerprint, your social security number, all of it. And it can't be changed.
So we're talking straight up identity theft then? Like someone could use my DNA to, what, open a credit card in my name?
It's definitely a risk, and a scary one at that, but it goes even deeper than that. Imagine, for a second, employers or insurance companies getting their hands on this data.
Okay, yeah, I see where you're going with this. Genetic discrimination. It's like something straight out of a dystopian movie.
Except it's not sci-fi anymore. It's a real concern. And then there's the potential for genetic manipulation.
Hold on, aren't we talking designer babies, Gattaca level stuff here? Because that's a whole other can of worms.
We're not there yet, but it's a conversation we need to be having. This 23andMe situation, it's a wake-up call. Because they're not just an ancestry website anymore, right? They're offering weight loss prescriptions based on your DNA.
Which just goes to show how companies are looking at our DNA as this like product to be bought and sold.
Exactly. And this breach really throws a spotlight on how vulnerable that data is.
Yeah.
It's not just about a company being careless with your credit card info. This is your genetic blueprint we're talking about.
This is a lot to process. You've got me thinking about like ditching all my devices and moving to a remote island somewhere. But we're not just here to fearmonger, right? There's got to be something we can do.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power, remember. The more you know, the better equipped you are to protect yourself.
Okay, so what can we actually do? Because unlike my credit card, I can't exactly get a new DNA sequence issued.
Right. Unfortunately, you can't just hit undo on your genetic code. But you can start with the basics. change your passwords, and not just for 23andMe. Any site where you might have used that same password, change it.
Solid advice. Password managers are a lifesaver, by the way. What else?
Be picky. Really do your research before signing up for any DNA testing service. Look into their privacy and security practices. Don't just blindly click agree without reading the fine print.
Treat it like that terms and conditions agreement. You know, the one that's like a million pages long.
Exactly. And the good news is the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, they're starting to crack down on companies with shady data practices. Like recently they went after a company, OneHealth.io, that used to be called Vitagene, for leaving sensitive genetic data unsecured.
It's good to know someone's out there fighting the good fight for data privacy. But going back to 23andMe, if my data was caught up in this mess, what are my options?
Well, first, keep an eye out for any notifications from 23andMe. They should be providing instructions on how to join that $30 million class action settlement. But honestly, even if your data wasn't involved in this specific breach, consider this your wake-up call.
So this isn't just a 23andMe problem then?
Not at all. Remember MyHeritage, DNA Diagnostics Center. This is an industry-wide issue. 23andMe is just the tip of the iceberg.
So where does that leave us? Are we just supposed to accept that our DNA data is out there, potentially being analyzed and exploited? It's kind of terrifying when you really think about it. It is terrifying, and it's something a lot of people don't even realize. It's not like our credit card info, right? If that gets stolen, okay, hassle, but I can get a new one. This is different.
Hugely different. We're talking about the very blueprint of who you are. And the crazy part is we don't even know all the ways it could be used down the line.
Exactly. We send in our spit thinking, oh, this will be fun. Maybe I'll find out I'm related to royalty or something. But are we accidentally signing up for something way bigger?
That's the million-dollar question. Today it's ancestry sites and, yeah, maybe some targeted ads that feel a little too personal. But tomorrow,
Okay, yeah. Where does this go? Because personalized medicine, that sounds great in theory, but what if it's not just treating diseases? What if it gets used for things like, oh, I don't know, predictive policing based on your genes?
that's not so far-fetched, unfortunately. And that's the conversation we need to be having as a society. Where do we draw the line? What kind of safeguards do we need to put in place? This goes way beyond just one company or one data breach. It's about the future of genetic data as a whole.
We've definitely opened up a can of worms here. And you've given me a lot to think about, that's for sure. So, any final thoughts as we wrap up this deep dive?
I think it comes down to finding that balance. We can't just, throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's so much potential for good with genetic research, but we have to be careful. We have to be informed, we have to ask the tough questions, and we have to demand better from the companies that have our most sensitive information.
It's about taking control, right? Not just being a passive bystander in all of this.
Exactly. And the first step is knowledge, like we're doing right now, having these conversations.
Well, on that note, I think it's time for me to go change all my passwords, maybe invest in a good tinfoil hat.
Probably not a bad idea.
Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, everyone. It's been eye-opening, if not a little bit anxiety-inducing. But hey, that's the world we live in, right? Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and maybe stay offline for a little bit. We'll catch you in the next one.